Many men don't know how to give the kind of love that a woman needs. We don't know how to be nurturing. We don't know how to be gentle. We don't know how to be romantic. And I think that's why the culture is struggling so much. That's why we have this thing called the male loneliness epidemic. But I made a TikTok making fun of it once, where I said there is no male loneliness epidemic for men who are romantic, who know how to treat the women in their lives like people and lovers and friends. And I'd like to talk more about that, but I got a date tonight, so I'll see you later. Toodaloo. And every person who sees that cracks up with my little joke at the end. It's just that we as a gender, we don't know how to really show love.
Hey, I'm Jen, host of the Open Bedroom podcast, where you'll find topics of sex, dating, relationships, non-monogamy, and more. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Open Bedroom podcast. Today, I actually have a follower on. I have Mr. Pollyanna.
Whoop, whoop.
Mr. Pollyanna and I connected on TikTok, I don't know, a year or two ago when
Several years ago, yeah.
When I first started over on that platform, and he was like my biggest fan, and I could always count on him to be talking on my stuff. And then I kind of got banned from TikTok and got community strikes, and then I just ejected myself from there. But we've been following each other ever since. And what I love about him is he's got this really incredibly balanced and healthy view on open relationships, open relating, what it is to be a man in that space. But what I've learned is he has a whole history of Christian upbringing and all this stuff that he's been programmed with that he's had to unlearn over the years. And I just think his story is really relatable. I think it's good timing for us to have this conversation on the podcast. So today we're going to talk about purity culture and how it fucks up men.
That's right.
Mr. Pollyanna, do you want to do like a little intro and we'll just dive in?
Sure. A little bit about me. Many of the people that I connect with online who deal with purity culture, they're almost always ladies. I'm one of the few men in that conversation. And I was chatting in the comments with a friend yesterday, and I said something to her, and then she answered back, "I'm sorry you were raised in that environment." And I answered back to her, I wasn't raised in purity culture. I married into it. As I was growing up, I went to church, but I was very liberal in my beliefs, and so was the church that we went to. But a lot of people from my generation, and I'm Gen X, mid 50s, we were raised in that church environment where, when it comes to sex and all the things that come with marriage and love, you don't talk about it too much. We were raised in that monogamous kind of culture where that was expected. So I went to church and I grew up there, but it wasn't it beyond that, beyond the basic generic American church view of what love looks like. It wasn't that big of a deal. But when I married, my wife had really different views than I did. Her family was much more conservative. They were very much against divorce. My parents were divorced, so there was some friction there. But I had two girlfriends before I met my ex-wife, and it really bothered her that she wasn't the first woman that I was with. And there was a lot of guilt that was projected onto me from that. And it wasn't just the love and the sex part. There were lots of things in that, the way that her parents related, and there was lots of anger, and there was lots of yelling. And I found out that a lot of that came from her grandfather, who was abusive. So just to survive in her family, you had to be tough. You had to stand up, and sometimes you had to shout. But what I found is when people get used to having that kinds of power, they just keep going back to it. And sometimes they use it on people who don't deserve to have that kind of treatment. And I went from this liberal Christian background into a much more conservative one. And we got into the Assemblies of God Church,
Mm.
and there was lots of doom and hellfire and everything that went along with it. But the thing that got me was when I walked into that sanctuary and I heard the music playing. And I've always been a musician. I love to sing. I play lead guitar, bass guitar, and drums and all the musical stuff. And when the band fired up, I was like, oh my God, I could do that. So I got into worship music really, really early in my evangelical training, I guess, and went into church leadership because of my musical and my speaking gifts. And I'm really well known in the city where my children were born for my church involvement. But I have since deconstructed my faith due to all the dysfunction in modern evangelicalism. And that's why I'm anonymous on TikTok, because a lot of people in that community know my face. And if I stuck my face on my TikTok videos, I know that they would immediately like report me to my family and tell them what a wicked sinner I am and all that other stuff. And I don't want to get into that. So even on my TikTok channel, you'll never see my face. It's a voiceover, and I'll show you like nature pictures or something, or like Daffy Duck on the screen right now, just to have something silly to look at.
Yeah.
There was lots of abuse within the family, just emotional stuff. And I reached the end of my marriage, and it was hard. There was no attraction left. I mean, when you're told that you're so dirty and that you're sinful because of something you did when you were like 19 and 20 years old, it sticks with you. And when your wife at the beginning of the relationship says to you, I saved myself for marriage, but the man I married can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you can't do anything about it now, but I remember that every night when I lay down next to you. And when your partner says to your face, I meditate on how wicked you are every single day. But you're raised in that church environment, and we don't get a divorce, we don't do it. And if you're also raised in the church, there are lots of relationships like mine.
Yeah.
Where you have the one controlling partner that does all of the dictating and making sure that everything is done just right. And then they're usually married to the person I like to call the happy dingbat. And I was the happy dingbat, right? So I saw lots of marriages like mine with the genders reversed. Sometimes it was the woman who was the driving force and the guy was the happy dingbat. And then sometimes it was the man who was the driver and he treated his wife like the happy dingbat. And I found that most women are not happy dingbats. I can say that about myself because I am. I'm very much a happy-go-lucky guy, and emotional maturity took time. And I used my wife as a model for that. One of the reasons I was so attracted to her in the beginning was she had her life together. I mean, she was not only just, cute as hell, she was really organized. And I knew, looking at her, I can learn so much from this woman. And I did. But there was so much toxic faith in the family that in the end, I was saying, what you're doing to me and the kids is abuse. It needs to stop. When she ran our diets, she ran our finances, she ran the kids' education because they had to be homeschooled. And we just stood up and said, we don't want this anymore. And when I said it, or when the kids said it, there was one of two responses: either you're a liar or there was no response whatsoever. And it just fits in with the whole evangelical need for control.
Mhm.
And I'm a very spiritual person. I've always loved the idea of God. I love going to church. I love knowing all the answers. I was a little Sunday school nerd that had to tell you what all, the gospel means, the words of Jesus and everything. But when I realized that the evangelical church did not align with my values, I knew I had to leave. So there was the guilt for being with two girlfriends when I was 19 and 20 years old. And by this time I was in my 50s and that was still being uh, mentioned.
Mm.
It's just there's so much that purity culture just tells you you're not good enough. And if you sinned once, we say that the blood of Jesus will heal you, but I'm going to continue to hold that sin over your head. And you just want to say, well, am I healed or am I not? And I think the answer is no, you're not healed as long as I can continue to pester you with that one thing you did when you were 19 years old. And I know my male privilege, the women who go through the same torture that I did.
Mhm.
It's so much worse. Like my first girlfriend post divorce was in a very, very conservative sect where, she wore the head covering and she wore the denim skirts and she was verbally abused by her husband for years, screaming at her, horrible abuse. She had 6 kids in that marriage, and she also had 2 miscarriages. So 8 pregnancies with this man when all he really did was weigh her down and tell her she wasn't good enough until the point where she was contemplating suicide. And the only thing that kept her from it were the kids. So I see my privilege and how it works. But if you read the stories of some of the women that have been through abusive marriages within the church, it's crazy. Um, I was interviewed by a woman named Gretchen Baskerville. She wrote a book called The Life Saving Divorce. And when she found me on Twitter in 2017 or 18 or something like that, she asked me to be interviewed for her book because I was one of the few men within that healing community. For those of us who have dealt with narcissism and how it fits in with evangelicalism. And that book will break your heart. It's huge. It's paperback, but it's really thick and just case after case after case after case where the women tell the stories of the abuse that they've dealt with and how it has harmed them. So I've dealt with some of the emotional abuse, but I've never been physically abused like many of the ladies within the church. I've never been sexually abused. So I see my privilege, but at the same time, what a lot of my friends have told me, don't compare your trauma to someone else's trauma just because their trauma was different from yours. It doesn't lessen yours. So I was with my ex-wife for 29 years, and at the end of it, I wasn't sure what to do. I knew I needed to get out, but I didn't know how.
Mhm.
And at that point, my daughter turned to me one day and said, "I love you, Dad. I wish your wife did." And when she said those words, yeah, your eyes just popped. That was when I knew I had to make the change. But even after that, I still took a year and a half until I finally filed for divorce and had the courage to do that. But leaving all of that guilt and shame um, was great for me. I
Okay.
was
I want you really quick to just
yes.
I want to put a pin right here and come back,
Hmm.
but I don't want
Yes.
you to go any further because I have questions.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to just take us back for just a step and then bring me to my question. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I follow Dave Ramsey. I guess I should also say I have a very similar background to you. I was also raised in church. I was raised Catholic in Catholic schools till I was in 6th grade.
Bless your sister.
went to public school for a few years, realized I'm going to get pregnant or be on drugs because I don't know how to cope with this like normal world. Went
Yes.
back into Christian school.
Hmm.
It was a whole thing. We also wore the skirts and all the things. And I
Right.
had several friends from high school that married as virgins. And then I had one friend who married a virgin, but she had been with a guy who sort of put the tip in. And then she was like devastated that she wasn't an actual virgin. I'm using air
Right.
quotes for
Right.
anyone listening. It was super fucked up. And I
Hmm.
remember I was the bad girl of the bunch. So I did
Hmm.
have sex in high school. So I didn't marry a virgin.
Good.
But I remember being with each one of my friends,
Mm.
as they walked down the aisle,
Right.
at the bachelorette parties,
Yeah.
and this angst that they had either about
Hmm.
being a virgin and being really proud of that
Hmm.
to their husband who wasn't. And
Yeah.
then for the husband who my friend who did have the guy who stuck just the head in, she was like traumatized. And he like your wife, he
Yeah.
guilt tripped her. He was
Hmm.
ashamed that she had quote unquote been with another man.
Right.
Like it took them years to get over that as
Hmm.
she walked down the aisle kind of scorned, like they wanted
Yeah.
to wear like a red dress. She didn't, obviously, but like
Oh my
that
God.
kind of attitude is just
Yeah.
crazy. So the,
Right.
so the reason I bring you to Dave Ramsey
Uh-huh.
is
Yes,
I
yes.
did financial peace. He's sort of been in and out of my world, just, on social media as this kind of guiding light for my finances. So I've been watching some of his
Hmm.
reels lately. The reason I say
Yes.
this is there's a guy on his show. I don't even remember his name, but he has a spin-off show. And this
Hmm.
particular man is like muscled up for Jesus, like they're all Christians, right? Well, he's like sexy and he's got tattoos and like it's like dark, sexy man lighting, and
Yeah.
he does a podcast show like Dave does. But his are for, married men that are Christian that are having a
Hmm.
hard time in their marriage. I'm
Right.
going to direct this to you. I promise. I'm getting there. I'm about to
Oh
land in the
no.
plane. Okay.
Cool. I trust you
So
completely.
I keep getting these reels served by these,
Hmm.
hot guy that's interviewing these very Christian men that are like, bro, I've been married, 25 years, and 20 of those years I have not had sex with my wife. Like she
Right.
stopped wanting me. And there's
Hmm.
another one, for the last 15 years, I've never strayed from my wife, but we don't have sex anymore. And
Hmm.
hot dude who's interviewing them is like, bro, you're not really in a marriage. Like, wake up. Your wife
Yeah.
left you 15 years ago. One of
Exactly.
them was like the wife spends half her time with her parents still, and then half the time is
Hmm.
like still sort of married in her 40s.
Right.
Like, I
Right.
don't
Right.
understand any of that. So the
Hmm.
reason I'm bringing all this up is
Yes.
obviously there is an epidemic of
Mhm.
all this, and I don't even think it's just religious. I think it's
Yes.
all of these marriages, and let's just talk
Hmm.
specifically about men,
Yes.
where
Yes.
men are not having sex
They're not.
with their wives, and then
Hmm.
they stay. So, Mr. Pollyanna, my question to
Right.
you is this somewhat applicable to you? And do you have any idea why men stay in a marriage that's inhospitable? There's no love, there's no touching, there's no sex. Like, give us some insight as to like why would a man find themselves in this situation? Why the fuck don't they leave? And then like how can we help maybe wake them up so
Yeah.
that we can help get them down the road onto their next path? And then we can talk about where your path led you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. As I look at other men, specifically online, because I'm a huge member of the community that deals with all of the toxic relationship stuff. The thing that always gets me in trouble, I guess, put finger quotes around that, is I agree with the women. My inner circle is totally female.
Okay.
Right now, I have one person I'm dating. We're super tight. I have one best friend here in town who I met on a dating site, but we just kept it platonic. And I just saw her last night. We're together all the time. And then I have the woman I call my Twitter crush. She is 1,200 miles away from me, but we text and talk weekly. So, what's the problem with men? Just some of the videos that I've seen recently kind of nail it down. In the past, our fathers, our grandfathers, they were all guaranteed a wife.
Hmm.
because women did not have control of their own finances. They couldn't vote. They couldn't have their own bank accounts. They couldn't own a home. But now women can. Women don't need men anymore for survival. They can survive just fine on their own. So, why would a woman want a man? Because she wants a loving companion. A lot of men do not know how to be loving companions. The culture that we were raised in as men, we're not really taught how to be men. We're just taught how not to be women. Don't show any weakness because that equals femininity, and that's bad. And you can take it with some guys so far as don't show much thoughtfulness. Just do your job, bring that paycheck home, and you're set for life. But heterosexual women need love. And many men don't know how to give the kind of love that a woman needs. We don't know how to be nurturing. We don't know how to be gentle. We don't know how to be romantic. And I think that's why the culture is struggling so much. That's why we have this thing called the male loneliness epidemic. But I made a TikTok making fun of it once, where I said there is no male loneliness epidemic for men who are romantic, who know how to treat the women in their lives like people and lovers and friends. And I'd like to talk more about that, but I got a date tonight. So I'll see you later. Toodaloo. And every person who sees that cracks up with my little joke at the end. It's just that we as a gender, we don't know how to really show love. And look back at my own grandfather. Um, Actually, both of my grandfather on my father's side, World War II messed him up. He had some mental illness going in, and when he came home, and I think he served stateside. I don't even think he went overseas. Uh, he was a violent man who threatened the life of my grandmother and my dad and dad's two sisters. And I look at my grandfather and I understand why my dad struggled with being a loving man
Hmm.
because he didn't have that influence at home. My grandfather on my mother's side was a physically abusive man. And my mom's parents would actually play my mom and her sister against each other because mom was like me. Mom was a happy dingbat, and they said, "Why can't you be more like your sister, who I'll call M?" But my aunt was the type A who had her stuff together, and they would say to her, "Why can't you be more easygoing like your sister, who I'll call K?" But as a gender, we haven't had very much influence in how to be loving and how to be tender and how to be gentle. And I lucked out. I have the most amazing mom in the world. And she loves to tell the story of before I was born, she talked to my father and said, "I don't care what you do. I don't care how this works between you and me as husband and wife, but I am going to love my kids and they're going to know it." So I had that sweet, loving influence. And then when my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, I was the mama's boy. I stuck with mom. I lived with mom. And I always had that loving, gentle influence. But a lot of guys don't have that. And they only hang out with other men. So where's it going to come from? Though there's a term I heard over the summer that just made everything fall together. How men do everything for the approval of other men. And the term is homosocial. They're dating women so that the other men in their life will say, "Cool, she's hot. Go out with her." They're achieving at work so their bros can meet at the bar after work and say, "Dude, you're killing it. Way to go with that promotion." But men look inward so much. We don't have a lot of feminine influence on our lives. And that's where we're missing out. And that's why I have done so well with my friendships and in dating and everything else, because I value women. They're important. I see them as people. And I wonder if many men do. And I think a lot of them don't. So the male loneliness epidemic, um, it's kind of self-inflicted, especially when I mean, if you look at the comments, if you look in the comments on TikTok and Instagram, when a woman posts something vulnerable, and then there's like 9 million guys that say, die alone with your cats.
Yeah,
And
you
and
deserved it.
and then the
Yeah.
woman, what does she post back? That sounds like a great idea. Thank you very much. We are showing women why they shouldn't trust us.
Mm.
Our violence in the way we speak,
Mhm.
in the hatefulness, it's just there's so much that men are missing on because they're afraid to be gentle and they're afraid to be tender. But gentlemen, if you can live like that, there will be no loneliness epidemic. You will always have a date, or in my case, you'll always have a girlfriend, a long term girlfriend who is always there by your side. And you'll get all the love and the affection that you want, but you have to make her feel safe and you have to make her feel secure. And most men can't do that because they're working from a place of brute force, where I found that most women really just want you to put your arms around them and kiss her on the forehead. And trust me, she will melt when you do that. But you have to be tender enough to get to that space. And she has to feel your character, like when you're going out on the very first date, and know who you are as a person. She needs to know that she will be valued. And if you don't know how to value a woman because you're in such a performative state for the other guys in your life, like strutting around like a peacock with your feathers out, a lot of times the women will just look at you and think, loser, show me something that helps me trust you. And I think a lot of men aren't trustworthy. um, a lot of the men in my life weren't. My dad struggled with that,
Mhm.
and in the end, he did the same thing I did. He wound up bowing to the opinions of his wife, who was also mega religious. And even though my father helped me out of my abusive marriage with all the purity culture and emotional abuse, he was afraid to leave his own marriage like that, and told my sister at one point, I'm 77. What am I going to do? And then at the same time, he said to my sister, I know my marriage is awful, but the house is so nice when she's gone. And like a lot of evangelical women, she was into the whole multi-level marketing, I think
Yeah.
what they call it. So she was gone a lot because she was an area manager and all that stuff. But you have to have the courage. Wow, this has gone on a tangent I didn't expect. You have to have the courage when both of your children come to you and
Mhm.
say, Dad, I want to spend time with you, but I never want to see my stepmom or her kids again because of the toxic faith in that family.
Mhm.
I want to be with you. I want to be with my father, but I can't take the religious talk around the table where they talk about the end times and America's going to hell and it's all hateful. My sister said that to my father. My stepmom threw a fit because it attacked her faith.
Right.
So my dad and my stepmom totally gaslit my sister and pretended like they didn't know what she was talking about. And then they came to me and said, Hey, why is your sister being so hateful? And I said, She's told you 5 times exactly what she's wanted. And that hasn't been acknowledged. And what I didn't say was because my stepmom will not allow it to be acknowledged. There's been such a cloud of religion over my life and my family. And in a lot of families, that's where it ties into too. We've been taught, what is good, what is right, what is wrong. And what's the first of the Ten Commandments that deals with people, how to treat people. It's the fourth commandment: honor your father and mother.
Mm.
So when my sister stood up and said, I don't want to see my stepmom or my family anymore, that was taken as an affront. 2 years later, I said the same thing. My dad never answered. I sent it in a text. I couldn't, I was so nervous. I didn't know what to say. But he never replied. I did see him a couple of times after that. He died a few years later.
Mm.
But so much of the problem with men, it either goes back to religion or it goes back to that toxic masculinity that we were raised with, where you have to be tough, you have to be macho, you have to be the guy who makes things happen, instead of the man who wraps his arms around her and kisses her on the forehead. Because women in relationships, so many women need to be nurtured. They need to be felt. Men need to mother their lovers, because if they could do that, that would unlock a whole new world of not just sex and physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy. And if we could do that, the world would be a better place. And it would also end the patriarchy and all that other shit. So yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to our pin
Absolutely.
and take us to the rest of the story.
Hmm. So the marriage was long. We were together for a very long time. And I finally got my divorce. I had a really sweet relationship with a woman here in town, but she was still evangelical. She was a lot more conservative than I was. I had totally deconstructed my faith. But one night she was talking to me and she said, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but the way you parent your daughter makes me wonder if you're the one. And when she used that phrase, the one, it took me back to my marriage, where phrases like, I wonder if this is God's will for us. I wonder if you're my one and only, and all of that stuff. And it made me hear just how confining that was, that I had to be her total. I had to be what the Bible says God is. I had to be her Alpha and Omega. I had to be her one and only. And I thought, I don't want that. I don't want anyone to put all of that weight on me, because I'm just a guy, and kind of a silly one at that. And we had a falling out and we split up. And I still think about her all the time because it was such a sweet relationship. But afterwards, I thought, I don't want to be someone's one and only.
Mm.
So why don't I just date openly? And some people call it dating openly, and some people call it polyamory, and some people call it open relationships. And I'm a writer, so I mix up my phrases, but it all means the same thing. And I just decided I only want to date people that date other people. Mm-hmm. And when I moved into that community, and it is a community, that's when I found my space. That's when I found my people, and things just changed. I looked at relationships differently in the 5 years that I've been dating polyamorously. I think I've dated like a dozen people, maybe more.
Yeah.
But see, I'm really romantic. So every relationship I go into, I want it to be long-term. Try that again. Every relationship that I go into, I want it to be long-term. I date to find a girlfriend. So I find my people, and usually on the dating apps, people trash the dating apps. The dating apps have been wonderful for me. I was on OkCupid for a long time. I found more I did find almost a dozen different people to date. And sometimes it was, I would meet with them for once and then, their lives would change or they'd have a family crash and they'd send me a message and say, it was fun, but I do not have the stones for a relationship right now. And we remain friends. We're still like chatting in the comments on Facebook and stuff. But I find most of my dates on the apps. I've only found one date in the wild and we dated for like 3 months. But even that, it was at a weekly karaoke with a poly group. So we all hung out together. But it's been wonderful. Mostly my relationships in the past have lasted like 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we break up. And people will point to it and say, see, I told you, poly doesn't work. But I'm like, well, look at every monogamous person. It's the same thing. Like my bestie, my long distance bestie, my Twitter crush. I used to joke with her. She said, I couldn't do that poly stuff. I couldn't do what you do. I'm like, yeah, but you're just a serial monogamist. And she said, what? And I'm like, we date, we meet people, we fall in love. And in my case, my relationships end when I put down a boundary. And then my partner says, no, that's not going to work for me. And then either they wind up leaving or I wind up leaving. There was one relationship, sweet woman. Oh my God. Okay. Every woman I've gone out with is sweet, duh, because I crush on everyone in the entire world. But she had another partner who really treated her poorly. And I was her emotional support through that. When she'd have a crash with him, she'd call me. And I knew it was bad when she was on a lover's weekend with him.
Mm-hmm.
And she called me to ask what to do with him. And they had been together for years and years and years. And she had told me about all the times that he had let her down because she was a poly woman and he was not a poly man. And he was married. And the wife knew, and the wife did not like that they were seeing each other, but they were codependent.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't divorce him. And I finally said, love your other guy, keep him for the rest of your life. I don't have anything to say about your relationship with him, but I can't hear about him anymore. Yeah. Because when you tell me how badly he treats you, it breaks my heart. So I need to go full parallel, which means our two relationships don't cross. I don't hear about him. He doesn't hear about me. There was lots of weird jealousy stuff. He blocked me on Twitter when I started posting, like she got a manicure. And I told her what my favorite colors were. They're written. Oh,
I remember this post.
Yes. So she showed up at my place with the red and black manicure and I snapped the photo and I posted it. And he was really upset. But we wound up blocking each other because it was hard. It was hard for me to think that the woman that I cared so much about was treated in that way. And that's like the most obvious time that I put down a boundary. And that made her really angry that I said that. Another time I had a partner ask me to move in with her. And it was a long distance relationship. She lived 2.5 hours away.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't just quit my job, find one in her town, hope it had the benefits because I'm a dad, and my insurance takes care of my kids. Yeah. So I can't just jump jobs at a moment's notice. And after the 4th time, she asked if I could move in with her. I'm like, no. So here's what's up. You keep asking. I keep saying no. We can't talk about this anymore. The answer is no. It's going to be no. Please don't ask me again. And she asked twice more during that same weekend. And my other partner was really jealous of that, honestly, rightfully so. And I wound up splitting up with the long distance partner.
Well, she wasn't respecting your boundary of stop asking me. I'm not
I
moving
know,
with
I
you.
know.
Like she
And
thought it was
it's
just going to change.
like there's a blessing to being a romantic man and there's a curse. So
Can I just say, like, my Scott is very similar to you. And I
yes,
feel
that's the
like,
vibe I've always gotten from the beginning. The photos
yeah.
of you two, you're so freaking adorable.
Oh, thank you. He is you. And so it's interesting because every time we have a new person in our life,
Mhm.
she's always like, no one has ever loved me like you do, Scott. Like nobody has,
I I hear that from every partner.
which the curse
Literally.
to that is they all want to move in with
Literally.
you,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah.
I tried cohabiting. It did not work.
Yeah.
It was very short-lived. It was 6 months and I was out.
Let me ask you then, what's it like
Mhm.
being a solo poly man? Because
It's
you don't find a lot of them.
wonderful.
Yeah, you love
It
it.
is wonderful. Um, I'm in a housemate situation now, and I'm really happy because I have a great roommate. But when I was on my own, I lived in my own apartment by
Mhm.
myself for 3 years. In that 3 years, in that tiny little apartment, I had 7 girlfriends, and some of them were long term. Uh, a couple of them were like maybe a month or two. One specifically, there's a woman here in town. Crazy about this woman. She is funny. She is smart. She is beautiful. She's a professional. And she's just really, really, I think the word that describes her best is precocious. I mean,
Oh.
she's such a turn on. And we had a short little like 4 date relationship.
Mhm.
Uh, but in the end, she came to me and said, "Hey, it's busy season at work," and she works in finance.
Mhm.
And it was tax season. And she already had a husband and a second partner.
Mhm.
So I was literally the third wheel. And she said, "It's been fun, but I can't. I don't have the stones. I love using that phrase. I don't have the stones for a
Yeah.
relationship right now." But guess what? Thanksgiving came. She sent me a text. "Have a great holiday. Thinking of you." Uh, so having your own place, being a solo
Yeah.
man, you can have those long-term relationships. My longest was 2.5 years, and that was a really beautiful relationship. But I had a few. I had one where it was one date and then her family fell apart. Her kids got sick
Mhm.
and the husband was not being very supportive. So she texted me and said, "I really had fun on our date, but I got to bail." And I'm like, "Oh no." And then we still chat in the comments. I just saw her recently at an event in the community. But solo poly men, if you're romantic, dude, you're never going to be without a date, especially if you know how to write a profile. And that
Mhm.
is what's really important. I always say you not just want to attract the right people with your profile, you want to repel the wrong ones. So, I mean, my profile is stacked. If you disagree with me on ethics or politics, you're not going to swipe right. But if you look at my photos, and I know how to take good pictures of myself too, a lot of people, you'll get a swipe, you'll get a hit. Um, it's fun when you're this sweet little lover boy and you got a place to yourself. And when you really, really dig in with
Mhm.
a woman, and that's what I think so many people think that open relationships are just like, hopping from one person to another, to another, to another. No, no, no. Take me deeper. Um, what's the phrase? One of my partners, we would write poetry to each other. May our roots intertwine.
Yum.
Yum is right. And I don't know if we stole that from
Yeah.
somewhere, but I may have used that line in several of my relationships because it's so good. But
Well, and it
when,
sounds like too, like I mean, at least from what I can see from Scott, I would assume this is true with
yeah,
you, but like when you have high emotional IQ and you
yes,
can, it's almost like
yes.
playing an instrument with a
It
woman. Like you're also
is.
incredible
It
in bed.
is. And you have to read up on that stuff. And guys, you should.
Yeah.
Tell Me What You Want by Justin Lay Miller. The Clitoral
Mm.
Truth by Rebecca Chalker. what were some? She Comes First.
Mm-hmm.
Ian Kerner. There are so many books out there that literally tell you how to be a better lover. And I always make the joke that I've studied to
Yep.
be a better lover. And if you have that emotional awareness and that tenderness,
Yes.
women go crazy for
When
that.
you said this is so funny. You are like Scott. So Scott was telling
Yeah.
me the first like adult book that he read as an adult, he
Mhm.
was in his
Yeah.
early 20s,
Mhm.
was She Comes First.
I love that book.
And he was just like, you just start to learn like what the anatomy is, and then you just
Right.
become really good at
Right.
making that happen. And then you have this
Uh-huh.
emotional IQ and sexual IQ that's really important.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put these three books and links probably to like Amazon or something. So if you guys want to, buy
Perfect.
any version of those. Okay, so Mr. Pollyanna, I think it's time for us
Hmm.
to sort of wrap this up. And what I'd love for
Cool.
you to end with is like, what is your best advice for guys that are listening to this podcast and they're like, where do I start? Like, I'm kind of like a man's man, and I'm realizing like I don't have high emotional IQ. I want women to want to be with me.
Hmm.
Or I've had this incredibly Christian indoctrinated background
Right.
and purity culture, and like I don't even know where to start. What would you
Hmm.
recommend?
Listen to women. They will tell you bombastic side eye. I love that. Listen to the women in your life. Listen to the women online. Don't crack off with some stupid comment in some woman's video. When you see 19 videos in a row where women are saying the same thing, um, believe them. Where would I start if you have no idea how to do that? Um, if your lover, if your wife, if your daughter, if any woman in your life is venting to you and you can tell she's agitated, uh, can you start with soft touch? Can you start just by putting your hand on her shoulder and just leaving it there? Are you in a position where where you could almost stand over her in a non-threatening way? Can you offer her physical comfort without any expectation of anything happen? If it's your lover, where you just touch her hand or put your hand on her forearm and just let her talk. Don't try to fix anything. Let her tell you what's wrong. A magic question that we hear on the internet all the time is, do you want advice or do you want a listening ear? I think the first step is just to listen. And when she says something, believe her. She's not making it up to make you feel rotten. Just believe her and say those words. I believe you. If it's your lover, kiss her on the forehead. Baby, I believe you.
Mm.
And think about those little terms of endearment. Do you call her baby? Do you call her honey? Do you call her sugar? Do you call her lover? Because lover is the magic word that will work every time. Um, it's just tenderness. And don't think you have to be the problem solver. She wants your presence. Okay, guys in the church, go back to the best Bible verses there are. What is God? God is a calming presence.
Mm.
23rd Psalm, what does he do? He calms me beside the still waters. Think about all those great verses about God being an ever present something in times of trial. I don't remember the whole verse,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's a
just
good one.
be her
Presence,
presence,
ever calm.
an ever present help in times of trouble. I think that's the
There we
verse.
go. Help. Ooh. So all of
And
these words and your voice right
mhm,
now,
yeah,
it's about softening. Men
soothing.
softening.
That is
How did
right.
you learn how to soften? Or have you always been kind of
Mm.
soft and pliable?
I my Okay, back to mom. Mom got me hooked on romance movies when I was a very young age. It started with sh like every other woman in the world, my mom had a huge crush on Cary Grant. So, you know, we watched Affair to
Oh
Remember.
yeah.
And then you see how
And
charming he
he
is, darling.
softens, doesn't he? He learns
Oh
how to
God.
soften. Yeah.
But and then when I went into college, I mean, I was in college in the mid 90s. So my male role models were Jack Callahan from While You Were Sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
which watch that movie, and it's a good Christmas movie too. Um, Tom Hanks in Sleepless in Seattle when
Yeah.
he's raising his son,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a really good, healthy relationship with his son. And everyone says, media is so bad, but no, watching these movies showed me how to be romantic. And even if you look at When Harry Met Sally, like Billy Crystal in the beginning, he's this really sarcastic, like New York guy, but in the end, you know, he chills out. So seriously, watch the romantic comedies with your wife. They will show you
Mm-hmm.
how to treat women. And even in the Tom Hanks and the Meg Ryan, when at the end of Sleepless, when they're going to meet at the top of the Empire State Building, Tom Hanks, I think it's Tom Hanks, comes up and talks to the attendant there. He says, "Have you ever seen An Affair to Remember?" And really sarcastically, the guy says, "One of my wife's favorites." And he says it with that disdain in his voice. Watch the romantic movies with your wife. Watch Pride and Prejudice. Forget about Mr. Darcy. Darcy's not the guy you want to focus on. You want Bingley. You want Mr. Bingley, the sweet guy that falls in love with Jane and does everything that's right. Because Darcy's kind of a prick and he has to be convinced into being a decent man.
Mm.
But if you watch those romantic movies that your wife goes nuts over, she'll show you what she wants. And you'll know it by which actor she's crushing on. Dare I say it, read some of her romance novels.
Mm.
That will do it as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So just put yourself in a more romantic point of view and watch movies that your wife likes, even if it's Little House on the Prairie. Think about Charles Ingalls, the stereotypical dad who plays the violin for his kids. And, he works with his hands and he's a farmer and he's a manly man, but he's a tender, manly man.
Mm-hmm.
So look for TV shows and movies where there are men like that and watch how your lover responds to it and see if you can steal a couple pages from his playbook.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. This has
Yes,
been
yes.
so much fun. It's been
Uh-huh.
fun to do something kind of off the cuff and
Yeah.
unscripted. I appreciate you spending time with us today.
I'm
And
pumped.
yeah, we'll see you next
Yeah.
time. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.